Mike Sullivan throws down the gauntlet to Adam Fox, and we tell you why the Rangers' new head coach was correct to challenge his star defenseman.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1376 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we got a lot to do here today. Mike Sullivan recently with some very interesting comments about Adam Fox and expectations from Fox this upcoming season. Gonna break down those quotes in just a second. Also, a couple of transactional moves for the New York Rangers. Blake Wheeler joins the Rangers front office, and there are a couple of in-house promotions that I find quite intriguing as well. But we begin with Mike Sullivan and really the strong words that he had for Adam Fox. I mean, not directly to Adam Fox, but obviously he was talking about Fox and his expectations for Fox this upcoming season. Now, we should preface this entire section by reminding everyone, and a lot of you probably already remember this, but Mike Sullivan is slated to coach the United States in the upcoming Olympics next year. And Sullivan also coached Adam Fox at the Four Nations Face-Off a little bit earlier this year. And as of right now, Adam Fox is not guaranteed a spot on the United States Olympic team. Now, I still think he'll eventually get there, but it was certainly noteworthy when the United States, they had to make their first 6 selections and announced the first 6 players that will be representing the U.S. at the Olympics next year. Adam Fox is not one of those 6 players. However, when they did the same thing a year ago, and the United States had to announce 6 players that would represent them at the Four Nations, Adam Fox was one of those players. So obviously, he made the cut the first time, didn't make the cut this time around. And as many of you noted, and myself as well, Adam Fox certainly scuffled a little bit during the Four Nations face-off. But with all that said, I still think Fox will eventually become an Olympian, but it's certainly not going to be handed to him. And Mike Sullivan, who is now coaching Fox, obviously with the Rangers and potentially with the U.S. Olympic team as well, was one of the people who made that very clear. This is what he had to say about Adam Fox and his prospects for joining the U.S. Olympic team. He mentioned that the start of Fox's season will determine whether or not he's an Olympian. But this is the direct quote right here. I'm probably stating the obvious when I say this, but performance matters. I think Foxy knows he's capable of a better game. And him and I have had discussions about it, and I think he's inspired with the opportunity to bring a better version of himself. And I told him when I became his coach that I was going to do everything in my power to help him become the best version of himself. So there's a lot to that. And there's another quote that we'll get to in just a little bit here, but Mike Sullivan basically is flat out saying that performance is going to count. There's not going to be any favoritism in terms of, Sullivan is the Rangers coach, so that means that he'll just bring Fox along with him for the Olympics. It's just not going to work that way. There's that to consider. Also, just the idea that Mike Sullivan is pretty plainly and pretty bluntly acknowledging here that Adam Fox was not at his absolute best this past season. Now, as we've mentioned multiple times on here, Adam Fox had the type of season last year that 95% of the defensemen in the NHL would sign up for in about 2 seconds. But by Adam Fox's own very lofty standards, it was a down season. Of course, as we've mentioned many times, he is not the only Ranger that had a down season this past year, but he was certainly one of them. Just seemed like he never really got his season off the ground, never really took over games the way that we've seen him do, the way that he's certainly capable of doing. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, it sounds like Sullivan has not forgotten what we saw from Adam Fox in the Four Nations face-off. Now, granted, it's a grand total of 4 games, right? It's 4 different countries playing each other. Sweden, Finland, the United States, and Canada. It's a round robin, and then you have the championship game. So the U.S., they did well, but they lost to Canada in the championship game. It's only 4 games total that the United States played, but it was not a banner showing for Adam Fox. One thing that really stood out to me, and it was a move that Mike Sullivan made in the United States' first game of the tournament initially. And when I say initially, I mean like right at the very start of this whole thing. But Adam Fox was tabbed to basically be the quarterback of the United States power play. He was out there for 1 power play or maybe 2, but it wasn't long after that where I guess Sullivan and the coaching staff, they just didn't like what they were seeing. They felt Zach Werenski could do a better job there, and they put Werenski on the United States' top power play unit, and Fox has obviously moved down, and Fox began to lose ice time as that tournament progressed as well. So, again, very clear here, looking at this quote, that Sullivan is expecting more from Adam Fox than what we saw last season, certainly both with the Rangers and also on the national level as well. And this is the second part of Sullivan's quote. And again, it got a couple of people talking, a little bit of buzz. It's the offseason now. So any kind of news is noteworthy at this time. And certainly, this qualifies because Mike Sullivan is talking about his star defenseman here. But this is what he had to say. He continues on from the part where he was talking about Adam Fox becoming the best version of himself. This is what he said. And not only is that good for the New York Rangers, it's also good for the U.S. team. He's a Norris Trophy winner, and he's a young guy. He's not aging out. He's capable of an elite game, and it's our job as a coaching staff to help him get there. And we're certainly going to do everything we can to do for that. But we believe that Foxy's capable of a next-level game, a Norris Trophy caliber game. You don't win the Norris if you're not capable of that, and we believe he still is. So again, he's mostly speaking positively about Adam Fox. He believes he's an elite defenseman. He believes that he should be in the running for the Norris Trophy. He's acknowledged the fact that he's won the Norris Trophy in the past and been in the mix for it several other times. But when you read all these quotes, talking about Fox is not aging out and talking about how we believe he still is capable of being a Norris-level defenseman, those are not the quotes that discuss somebody that is coming off of a career season. So honestly, man, I really can appreciate the way Sullivan went about this, because he's certainly not crushing Adam Fox or burying him or, talking horrendously about him, right? But there's a little bit of a call to arms from Mike Sullivan to his star defenseman, that we're going to need a little bit more from you. And we believe that certainly you are one of the best defensemen in the game, and you need to play like it. This is something that I've talked about a lot, because there's a lot of fans out there that are down on Adam Fox, and I can understand that after what we saw from this team this past season. We're going to do our best to keep discussion from last season at a minimum going forward, because we are about to start the preseason and get into the regular season proper, but at times it's inevitable. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Fox is one of many, many players on this team that underachieved this past season. But people throw around the dreaded W word, right? Fox is washed. Adam Fox is 27 years old. I realize there have been some lower body injuries that, obviously have affected him, at least at times. I think certainly during the Rangers' most recent playoff run, he had that collision against the Caps and never really quite looked like his old self going forward after that. So I can understand there being some concern there. But Adam Fox is 27 years old, won't turn 28 until February. This is somebody who just now should be coming into his prime. And obviously we hope that's still the case. And it sounds like, again, Sullivan, the rest of the Ranger coaches, they're going to really, really push him to see if they can get him back to that level. And I'm all for that, because if the Rangers can't get a better version from Adam Fox than what we saw last year, then they're not going anywhere. And again, none of that is to say that Fox was terrible last year, but it's certainly fair to expect more out of somebody that basically was a superstar right out of the starting blocks once he made his NHL debut. So with all that said, we're in with the positives here. I mean, not that was overly negative, but you know what I mean. There's a call to arms here is what I'm going to call it, from Mike Sullivan to Adam Fox. I really do feel, and I've said this before, that this will be a very strong season for Fox. As of right now, he is not on the Olympic team. I would imagine that would be a huge motivating factor for Fox going into this upcoming season. I think certainly he's going to want to be there. Your pride is on the line. I think it means a lot for these guys, whether it's Adam Fox or anybody else, to represent their home country on the national stage. And obviously that's still something that Fox has a chance to do. So that should serve as a motivating factor. And I think just the fact that Fox himself is coming off of a down season last year, and certainly the Rangers were coming off of just an epic collapse last season. So that too will be a motivating factor for Adam Fox. I mean, the Olympics, it's that's all well and good. And I understand it means a lot to everybody. I would hope that the motivation for Adam Fox would come from within, and it would be the Rangers first and foremost. But you put all that together, man, Adam Fox has a lot to prove this season, and I think he's going to get after it in a big way and maybe surprise some people, because there are some Ranger fans right now who are really, really down on this player. And again, I understand it to a degree, but we've seen a heck of a lot more good from Adam Fox than bad since he's been in the league. I think another reason why you're looking at a bounce-back season from Adam Fox is something that many of you have pointed out. I've pointed out on here too. The very simple fact that he's very likely about to be playing with the best defense partner that he's ever had in Vladislav Gavrikov. There's not a ton of flash to Gavrikov's game, but there doesn't need to be. He just needs to be a steady, consistent presence on the Ranger blue line. And it would be a huge upset, I think, if Adam Fox and Vlad Gavrikov did not start this upcoming season on the same pairing. So Fox has that working in his favor as well. And now he's also, Adam Fox, got a coach that very clearly is expecting a lot out of him. It's one thing for Sullivan to talk about this with Adam Fox, but he very freely volunteered this information to all of us as well. And again, I wouldn't call it like a call out. He's certainly not bashing Fox in these quotes, but he's challenging him like, okay, we need you to be one of the absolute best. That's what we see you as, and that's what we need you to be going forward. So hopefully that is indeed the case. And Fox can get off to a great start this season. Obviously, that'll help the Rangers and earn his way onto the Olympic team. Win-win for everybody. So let's hope that that's the case. In just a minute, we're going to move on, though. We're going to talk a little bit about the return of Blake Wheeler. Now, he's not going to be lacing up the skates or anything like that, but Wheeler does return to the Rangers organization this upcoming season in a front office role. We're going to talk about why that's probably a good thing for the New York Rangers. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it fits however you would like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, it is easy, it is the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for continuing to support this podcast. Really does mean a lot. In our next episode, we mentioned Vladislav Gavrikov just a second ago. And in our next episode, we're going to do best and worst case scenarios for the Rangers, top free agent get this offseason. He was the guy that basically they spent all their free agent money on. Hopefully it's money well spent, but we talk about him in tomorrow's episode. Later this week as well, we've got the Rangers Flyers rookie series. We've got start times as well. The games will be played on Friday at 7:05 p.m. puck drop and on Saturday at 5:05 p.m. puck drop. And no word yet as far as streaming these games. I mean, the Flyers have done it in recent years. The Rangers, it's kind of hit or miss. Hopefully at least one of the two teams is there and we'll be able to watch them and then discuss it here on Locked On New York Rangers going forward. So each of those two games will get their own episode as well. Definitely looking forward to that. But for right now, let's shift our attention to the return of a former New York Ranger. That would, of course, be Blake Wheeler. Multiple reports are out there today on Monday as I'm recording this, that Wheeler is joining the Rangers in a hockey ops advisory role. And we'll talk about the hiring in just a second and whether or not Wheeler can be a fit and whatnot. But we certainly know, if nothing else, and I realize this does not guarantee success in a front office role, but Blake Wheeler does have the credentials as far as a playing career is concerned. 1,172 regular season games with the Bruins, Thrashers, Jets, and Rangers. If I'm not mistaken, he was the final Atlanta Thrasher in the NHL. So there's no more Thrashers left, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. He played for those four teams. I mean, Thrashers and Jets are the same team, but you know what I mean. He scored 321 goals, 622 assists, and a total of 943 points, and also had another 10 goals, 35 assists, and 66 career Stanley Cup playoff games. Now, of course, Wheeler, he spent the final season of his career with the New York Rangers. That was 2 seasons ago. That was when the Rangers made it to the conference final, won the President's Trophy, were pretty close to making it to the final, didn't quite get there. But, he came to the Rangers on a discounted rate. Basically, the Jets bought him out, and he was still getting some money from the Jets at that time, obviously, but he signed with the Rangers for 6 figures, and I don't know. I mean, it wasn't a great season. Very clearly, we were getting a Blake Wheeler that was on the back nine of his career, and I think all of us understood that when it happened. But he started to produce and then unfortunately got injured. But in 54 games with the Rangers, 9 goals, 12 assists, and made it back for 1 playoff game as well. As far as the Blake Wheeler moments that I remember, There's one that's kind of circulating on social media right now because Mika Zibanejad made just like an unreal pass to Wheeler, and Wheeler was able to score. And Wheeler just had, I'm not even going to try to do it for those of you watching on YouTube, but he just had like the funniest look on his face ever and just kind of smiling, just kind of in awe of the pass that Mika had gotten to him. So that was a cool moment. And then also, he wasn't even playing, but the Rangers got a big playoff overtime win in Game 3 on the road against the Canes. Panarin scored the game winner. And, all the Rangers are in the corner and they're mobbing each other on the ice. Blake Wheeler is on the other side. He's down in the tunnel and he's pounding on the boards, yelling and screaming for them and basically just going crazy and joining the celebration. And then high-fiving everybody as they were heading into the locker room. And, as far as Wheeler with the Rangers, again, the injury certainly hurt. It's too bad he got injured when he did. He was starting to pick it up at least a little bit, at least giving you like third line level of production. But unfortunately, he had a nasty injury, torn tendons and broken fibula, I believe it was. His skate basically stuck in the ice and just pretty gruesome fall. But still very cool to see Wheeler make it all the way back that season for Game 4 in the conference final, because everybody pretty much thought he was done for the season, but not to bet against a hockey player if you've been watching this sport for any amount of time. And he got back out there for the Rangers. They unfortunately did lose that game. You know what? Is it possible the Rangers missed Blake Wheeler this past season? I think it's at least possible. Certainly there was nobody that really took the reins in a leadership role. And I'm not saying Blake Wheeler necessarily would have done that or would not have done that, but it always felt like he was very well liked by his teammates with the Rangers. And they probably could have used somebody in that big brother role, especially after, Jacob Trouba got traded and everybody was down in the dumps. Maybe they did miss him, at least from like a team morale standpoint. As far as his fit, with the Rangers organization in this hockey ops advisory role, I'm certainly, open to it. As we mentioned just a second ago, the credibility is 100% there. As a player, he had a heck of a career for himself. One thing that I like is that when you look at Wheeler and the other three individuals that were given promotions, and we'll get to those three in just a minute, but when you look at all that and what they're going to be doing in the front office and whatnot, you've got a very diverse crew. You've got guys that play in the NHL to varying degrees of success, guys that did not play in the NHL, guys that have been with the Rangers for a very long time, one role or another with the Rangers organization. You've got guys that just got here, like Blake Wheeler. They all seem to be at different points in their careers. And with Blake Wheeler, now 39 years old, but for a front office member, that's a little bit on the young side, especially when it comes to a former player. So I think it says a lot about, how respected he was by this Ranger organization, how liked he was that, just 2 months, not even 2 full months after Blake Wheeler announces his retirement, he is now given a front office job with the New York Rangers. And this is somebody that's still very close to the game, very close to the modern game. Remember, Blake Wheeler was still an active NHL player. He was playing in an NHL game as recently as approximately 16 months ago. So he's very, very close to the modern player, the modern game. He can give you kind of a fresh new perspective, at least in theory. Who knows how he's actually going to do in this role? We will see. But he did officially announce his retirement 2 months ago, and now once again is able to get this job with the New York Rangers. And I'm all for it. I'm all for giving people a chance, and we'll see how it goes. But that was not the only bit of news that dropped here on today, Monday, as far as the front office is concerned. There were a couple of other in-house promotions by the Rangers, and a former player made his way back to the New York Rangers. A former New York Ranger is now back in a front office role, of which he actually served not that long ago. But we'll tell you about all those players in just a second. All right, so we got some other in-house promotions by the New York Rangers. Blake Wheeler was sort of the attention grabber on social media today because, again, he played with the Rangers not too long ago, barely over a year ago. He was an active member of the New York Rangers. And certainly he's the biggest name of this bunch for any hockey fans out there, just general hockey fans. But there were some other in-house promotions as well. We've got Ryan Martin being promoted to associate GM of the New York Rangers. He will also continue in his role as the general manager of the Hartford Wolfpack. He's been there for several seasons. We've also got Jim Sullivan, who has been promoted to assistant general manager, and Ryane Clowe rejoins the Ranger organization, and he will be also an assistant general manager. So we'll go one at a time here, talk about all three. Not really hirings. I guess in Clowe's case, it is a hiring or a rehiring, but the promotions here. We'll begin with Ryan Martin. We've talked about him every once in a while on this podcast because he has been in that role as the Wolfpack general manager for the past couple of seasons here. But this will be overall Martin's 5th season with the New York Rangers. He has gone from assistant GM with the Pack to general manager of the Pack to now still general manager of the Pack, but also associate GM of the New York Rangers. Now, before all that happened, he spent 16 seasons in the Detroit Red Wings organization, including the final 11 of those as the assistant GM of the Red Wings AHL team. He won 2 Calder Cups there in the Detroit organization, and he was with the Detroit Red Wings, their 2008 Stanley Cup team, as the director of hockey administration. So he's won a handful of championships in the Detroit organization. He also spent 8 seasons as the GM for Detroit's AHL team, the Grand Rapid Griffins. So it's funny because hearing all this and kind of going through his resume and kind of reacclimating myself with, who he is and everything that he's done in the hockey world, you hear all this, and it kind of reminds me of a term that I use for Ranger players or just hockey players in general. I'll say that somebody is an NHL, AHL swingman. And basically, that's just a fancy term that I made up for somebody that kind of splits their time between the NHL and the AHL. Maybe they spend a lot of time in the AHL, but you can call them up to the NHL on an as-needed basis. It's kind of the same thing here with Martin, where it seems like he's logged a little bit more time and had maybe some bigger roles in the AHL than the NHL, but certainly he's had some big roles with NHL teams as well, most notably the Red Wings, 1 season with the Sharks, and now back for his second tenure of duty with the New York Rangers. But as far as evaluating him based on what the Wolfpack has done in recent seasons, and the Pack struggled this past year, just not enough offense. That seemed to be their biggest downfall, their biggest issue. But they have been in the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 years, and they made somewhat deep runs in each of those years. Both seasons, the Pack won 2 playoff rounds and then got knocked out in the round of 8. So they made a run of it, a little bit of a Cinderella team both years, but obviously I couldn't make it any farther than that. And I will say this in Martin's favor as well. We've seen a decent amount of players, spend some time with the Hartford Wolfpack and then make their debut for the New York Rangers. And in many cases, they've been at least somewhat successful. First of all, Will Cooley, I think you got to start with him. When we're talking about Martin's tenure, obviously, we're not going to count Igor because Igor was with the Wolfpack just before Martin took over as GM. But you got Will Cooley, you got Matt Rempe and Adam Edstrom. They were both with the Wolfpack while Martin was the GM there. And, I think they both certainly look like full-time NHLers at this point and, fourth liners at worst. You've got somebody like Braden Schneider, who's obviously become a very solid defenseman for the New York Rangers. Brennan Othman, now, he hasn't really put it together in the NHL as of yet, but he put up some big-time numbers in the AHL. Brett Berard is another guy. He's still just getting started, but Ranger fans seem pretty high on him. The Rangers themselves seem pretty high on him. And even Dylan Garand, he hasn't done anything in the NHL yet, but you can still tell that obviously, there's some potential there for sure. So all this is to say that while Martin was the GM, there were a decent amount of players with the Wolfpack that played well and have, in some cases, carved out roles for themselves with the New York Rangers. Now, I tend to give more credit to the coaching staff in situations like that than the GM, but still, he's creating, an environment in which players can thrive, and that's obviously a good thing. Martin does seem to be very highly thought of because, this report goes out a little bit earlier today, and people are talking about Martin overall. And a lot of people around the NHL, a lot of pundits and national reporters and whatnot, they seem to think that he is on track to eventually become a general manager for an NHL team. Now, obviously, he's not there quite yet. It also sort of begs the question if he will eventually become general manager of the New York Rangers. And I know there's some people who are going to hear that and get excited because there's certain Ranger fans that are done with Drury. And I get it because, the last year and a half or so, it hasn't been a banner stretch for Chris Drury. I don't think the Rangers are prepared to make any kind of a move like that. Now, if the Rangers sputter this upcoming season and they're terrible and they miss the playoffs by 10, 15 points, then we might have to have a conversation. I do think this is a big year for Chris Drury. And if he were to lose his job, and I don't want this to happen. I really don't. I want the Rangers to get back into the mix, be a playoff team, be competitive, and hopefully be a threat come playoff time. That's certainly what I'm hoping for. But if that doesn't happen and scenario number 1 is what plays out and the Rangers fall apart and everything's terrible and his moves all backfire, then Chris Drury, certainly that seat's going to be getting warm. And at that point, maybe they do make a switch to Martin. I think it's at least possible. Martin's still in the room, but it does sound like, again, looking around the consensus from people around the NHL, reporters and whatnot, that Martin is a future NHL GM in the making. Speaking of which, we got another individual that might fit that description, and that is going to be Jim Sullivan. He was promoted to assistant general manager with the New York Rangers. And there's some people that seem to think that he's on track to eventually become an NHL general manager as well. But Sullivan is entering year 17 with the New York Rangers organization. He was previously promoted before the start of the 2021-2022 season. The Rangers promoted him to VP of Hockey Strategy and Data Management. It sounds important. It sounds like an important title, right? But for what it's worth, look, that's been his role for the last 4 seasons. And that was in 2021-2022 when the Rangers sort of reemerged and they became contenders again. They were a surprise team that year and obviously made a heck of a run at it into the Eastern Conference Final and 3 straight strong seasons of making the playoffs, a couple of deep playoff runs in there as well. Now, is that all because of Jim Sullivan? All because he got promoted? No, but I've said many, many times on here that anytime the Rangers succeed, anytime they fail, everybody in the New York Ranger organization from the very top right on down, everybody gets a little piece of that. Everybody gets a little bit of credit when they succeed. Everybody gets a little bit of the blame when they fail. It's really as simple as that. And Jim Sullivan is no exception to that. Like I said, he got that promotion and the Rangers started playing a heck of a lot better and seemed to get out of the rebuild a little bit early. Before all that, he had been the director of player care and development / analytics and hockey technology for 7 seasons. And there's some people that, myself included, have mixed feelings on analytics, really across all sports, but I think they certainly do have their place. And it seems like this is somebody that's very versatile and has worn a number of different hats in the Ranger organization. He actually started with the Rangers in 2009 as a video analyst. So he's been here, like we said, for quite some time. We've also got Ryane Clowe. Clowe is back with the New York Ranger organization. He had previously been a hockey advisor for the Rangers from 2021-22 to 2023-24. So again, he joined them right before they became contenders. Now, Clowe was an assistant general manager for the San Jose Sharks this past season. And I know some people are going to hear that and say, oh my God, the Sharks, they're terrible. Why do we want this guy back and this, that, and the other thing? Look, again, everybody has a hand in the success or failure of the team for which you are employed. I will give you that. I don't know who really could have done anything differently with the Sharks this past season. That is a team going through a lengthy rebuild, and they do have some young, exciting players, some very high draft picks, obviously, but I don't think anybody was winning with that team this past season. So Clowe leaves them. He comes back to the Rangers. With the Rangers in the past, Clowe had been a hockey operations advisor and co-senior advisor. And, Clowe, he's had some health issues in the past, and it sounds like they stem back to certain concussion issues that he had when he was a player. And obviously we wish all the best for him. But when he stepped down from the Sharks position, there were some Sharks fans that had some concern with him for him. They thought it might have been health related. It sounds like that's no longer the case. He just simply resigned from the position, and now he rejoins the New York Rangers. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll see if there's any other details to that entire story, but it sounds like he just resigned from one position and then took a very similar position, pretty much the same position, with a different team. As far as Clowe and his playing career is concerned, he played 491 career NHL games with the Sharks, the Rangers, and the Devils. Now, you will be forgiven if you don't remember Ryane Clowe as a member of the New York Rangers because he wasn't here for very long. He was traded to the Rangers by the Sharks in the 2012-2013 season, right in the middle of the season. Basically a rental. He ended up playing 12 games with the Rangers that season and then 2 playoff games as well. But he does have some interesting background as it pertains to his coaching career. He was an assistant coach, for the Devils for 2 seasons in 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018. The Devils finished dead last in the Metro in year 1 where Clowe was there. They rebounded in year 2 to make the playoffs, but they did lose in the first round to Tampa in 5 games. And then Clowe, after the season, left that position. He became the head coach for the expansion Newfoundland Growlers of the ECHL, who at the time, this team no longer exists, but at the time, they were the ECHL affiliate for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Unfortunately, he had to step down due to health concerns in January of that season. And again, we all hope that he's doing better now and he's ready to go with the New York Rangers. But what's interesting there is his team ended up winning the Kelly Cup, which is the championship cup for the team that wins the ECHL. John Snowden took over when Clowe had to leave. So unfortunately, he didn't get to be there and see it all the way through to the end. But obviously, he had at least a little bit of a hand in that. He was the head coach when the season began of a team, an expansion team that won the league championship. So that's pretty cool in its own right. As far as final thoughts on all three of these individuals and Wheeler too. None of these moves are going to make or break the Rangers, but I don't see anything wrong with any of them. It's good to have some different voices, some different perspectives. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the thing I can appreciate about this is that all four of these individuals have vastly different backgrounds and probably different ways of going about their business. You've got Martin and Sullivan. Both seem to be front office, fast risers. These are guys that people believe might become general managers of NHL teams in the future. Clowe is somebody that's back with the Ranger organization, so there's some familiarity there. There's familiarity with Blake Wheeler. As I mentioned earlier, it's a new voice. It's a new perspective. He hasn't done this before, so hopefully he can, play a solid role for the New York Rangers in the front office. If nothing else, there's a lot of familiarity. These guys are veterans of the Ranger system in a lot of cases. Now, there might be some people that would rather just clean house from top to bottom after what we saw this past season. I understand that. But again, these all seem like sensible hirings, sensible promotions. I think it's all good. And as I mentioned earlier in the episode, whether the Rangers succeed or fail, it's not going to come down to just these four individuals, but it does come down to everybody collectively as a whole, from the top to the bottom, and everybody has a hand in every success or failure this Ranger team has. So we'll see how everything shakes out. We can call it there. As far as just a couple quick announcements here, we are back to 5 episodes per week beginning this week. We're going to stay that way for approximately the next 10 and a half months. The season's right around the corner. Very much looking forward to it. And hopefully you guys will be here with me every step of the way for this roller coaster that we call Ranger hockey. Also, if you have any stories of meeting Sam Rosen, feel free to send them my way. I've heard from a couple of you guys already. We'll read your stories on a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers. And also stories about Stefan Matteau, the Game 7 double overtime winner against the Devils. Who you were with, what you were doing, how you reacted when Matteau scored that goal. Definitely feel free to send it my way. We'll read those stories on a future episode of Locked On Rangers as well. But we'll call it there for today. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with Locked On New York Rangers, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at JChick17. Once again, at JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.